Hello, everyone. I'm pretty excited about this. This is something new we're starting at Tuscaloosa Public Library. It's a local author series. And of course, we couldn't start with anyone other than Carolyn Breckinridge. How are you doing today?
Aw, I'm fine, thank you. Oh, nice. Thanks, Ron. I appreciate it. And
Yeah,
thank you for having us here, me and
uh,
all the other people to follow.
no problem. We're glad to do this. And just a little backstory. Carolyn actually brought the idea to us, so you could credit her for this. And like I said, it's such a great idea. It made me
Thank
wonder, like, why weren't we doing this before? But yeah, I'm really excited to be doing this. So I'll just get started with some questions today. First, tell us a bit about yourself and how you became to be Carolyn Breckinridge.
Okay, well, my real name is Carolyn Waltz Ezel, but Breckenridge is my middle name. So I write by Breckenridge when I'm writing for adults, and when I write for children, I write under Carolyn W. Ezel. And that way, parents can tell what's appropriate, not appropriate for children, and it isn't so confusing when you're looking in no card catalogs anymore, but when you're looking up authors. I'm a little bit behind times here. But in any case, so I was born in New York and basically was one of two children of very adventurous parents. We lived all over the world. I grew up in East Africa and Pakistan, Lebanon. Loved it, came back to the university, came to school here. One of the subjects I studied quite a bit was English creative writing. I majored in anthropology, cultural anthropology. Eventually became a clinical social worker many years later, and loved that field as well. And actually they're very similar. Writing and clinical social work are very similar because you really have to listen to people, which is very important for authors, to be listening to how people talk and what they say. And there's knowing people, learning people, never assuming. These are all things that you have to do in both professions, I think. So basically, I started writing when I was probably using crayons, and have always written, have always wanted to write. Loved to read when I was little. I think, Ron, I may have told you before, but my grandmother tells the story of me sleeping with my books, not my stuffed animals, and would not go to bed until I had every book in the room in bed with me. And I'm sure it was really, really scratchy and lumpy, but I don't remember it. So I do remember going to the library as a young child, especially when I was really, really into Nancy Drew. And I remember just opening up books and being so excited. It was just so neat to think I was about to go off on another adventure and solve another crime. And I remember the smell of the books. That's what I remember the most, I think, is sitting on the floor of the library and the smell of the books. So it's just something I've always wanted to do. When I retired, I had a lot more time to make that happen. So that's what I've been doing.
So you've mentioned the library quite often.
Yes.
And if anyone visits the library, then they're familiar with you and your organization, the Tuscaloosa Writers and Illustrators Guild. So tell us a bit about that, your involvement with this organization, and exactly what do you do?
Okay. Tuscaloosa Writers and Illustrators Guild it has an amazing story in and of itself. It actually began back in the 1970s. Can you imagine that?
Wow.
I know. And at the time, it was the Guild of Professional Writers for Children, and so everybody in there wrote for children. It started on the university campus. Margaret Searcy and Hazel Bruff, some of the early members of it. Sort of spearheaded the idea. And back then you had to be voted in, you had to have already published a story for children somewhere, but it was a very supportive organization. So we'd meet once a month, and we continued meeting once a month all the way through to this virus that has just come up. We had not missed 1 month in all of those years, from the 1970s all the way until this year, when we had to stop because of the virus. And we haven't quite got the Zoom thing down with all of our members yet, but I think we'll probably move to a Zoom for a little while, because we have members in their 30s, but we also have a member who's 99
Right.
and everything in between. So I think we won't risk anything for some time. And our 99-year-old member is one of our most prolific. She's still writing. She has one book that's coming out this month, I think, and she has one or two that are in publication, and she's just amazing. She's truly an amazing lady. So I joined in the 70s, and then we came over to the library many, many years ago, and we have met in the Rotary Room for umpteen years now. And I guess about 4 or 5 years ago, maybe not that long, we realized none of us were writing for children anymore, save every once in a while. So we were calling ourselves the Guild of Professional Writers for Children, but we were writing all kinds of stories and books, and I mean, horror, fantasy, you name it. Everybody was writing poetry. Everybody was writing something different. And so as a result of that, we decided to change our name. So we did change it to Tuscaloosa Writers and Illustrators Guild, also to include artists if they chose to be involved. And most everybody in the group, we have some who do also illustration, but for the most part, it's mainly writers in different genres. We're very supportive of each other, offer a lot of positive critique, and welcome new members. It's an open group.
You've mentioned the scope of work that comes off the guild, whether it's, a science fiction children's book or whatever. But you are most known for your Addie Brampton series, Tuscaloosa Moon, Tuscaloosa Boneyard. And I remember I started in circulation around the same time that Tuscaloosa Boneyard came out, and we could not keep it on the shelf. So obviously it's very popular.
Thank you.
So fans of this series, can they expect another book? Does Addie still have more mysteries to solve?
Yes. In fact, I was preparing it for sale at the Druid City Art Festival this year. And then that was going to be its debut because it actually features the Druid City Art Festival in it. And I thought that would be a real fun thing to do. But unfortunately, of course, we didn't have that. So what I did, I slowed it up a little bit, but it is ready. It's called Tuscaloosa Trolley, and it'll be out very soon. I was trying to debate, Ron, about whether to put it out while I couldn't go read, while I couldn't do book signings. It's just very complicated right now for all authors, I think, in terms of what to do. But before I wanted to real quickly show you, these are 2 books the Guild has put out. I know that that's the most recent one. You have some copies in the library. It's called Tuscaloosa Stories. Can you see it? I don't know if you can.
Yes.
Tuscaloosa Stories. And this is written by a number of our different Guild members. And before that, and this one can be purchased at Ernest and Hadley and online and so forth. This one, I don't think Barnes & Noble carries it, but this one here is out of print now, but it was the first one, and it went around to all the elementary schools in the city and in the county and was donated to them. So I just wanted to bring that up from the point of view of the Twig members. And that's one of the things that we do also, is we try to sort of tell stories to children. These are 4th grade level books. But yes, you can certainly expect Tuscaloosa Trolley out, getting back to that. And I just didn't want to forget that other thing that I wanted to mention about Twig. Yes.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that. It's always great to highlight the work that Twig is doing. The community really embraces the work whenever it's released. So thanks for mentioning that. But shifting back to your work, we're here to talk about Kaleidoscope Jane today.
Yes.
So I have 2 questions associated with Kaleidoscope Jane. First, when did you know that you wanted to do a collection of short stories? Did the idea come first, or were these just stories you collected over time and you just put them in one compilation? So which came first, I guess, the process or the idea?
Neither. Actually, I don't know how to answer the question. It's a good question. Actually, what happened, I was in the middle of Tuscaloosa Trolley, writing it and just minding my own business. And these women, I think Nancy came first. She just came stomping into my brain, and she was ready to be born right then, could not even wait till the end of the chapter. So here she came. And then, with the exception of about maybe 2 who I sort of pondered a day or 2 before I wrote, the rest of them just poured out. They just poured out. And they all sort of had their own stories to tell, but I think there are some overarching themes that are in the book. that do connect them. But at the time, I wasn't thinking that. It was just these people who were in my brain who just wouldn't leave me alone until I went ahead and wrote their stories. And they basically told me what to write. It was just the strangest thing, because within a month, the book was finished. And
Oh, wow.
I never intended to write it in the first place. It just happened. So I don't know if that was my way of procrastination. I don't know what I was doing, but in any case, it did take me off of Tuscaloosa Trolley for a little while, but it was something that it just was so spontaneous. It was really a gift. It was amazing to me how quickly that came. And I think part of it was that with writing, things sort of percolate for a long time. And as a matter of point, in the story I'm going to read today, the book itself, Kaleidoscope Jane, is dedicated to May and Sylvie, our grandchildren, and it says, may our worlds be filled with ladybugs. But although it's dedicated to them, it was my nephew who came down when he was a little boy to Alabama from New Jersey, and who went back to New Jersey and for his elementary school wrote, "A good influence on my life. My Aunt Carol is very unique. She is so unique, she bought 500 ladybugs instead of spraying pesticides on the bugs that ravaged her roses." Well, that was written in 2002. So Louise, the story I'll read today, had been in my brain somewhere since 2002, because that is actually what stimulated the story, was that one sentence that he wrote in this report.
I hear authors mention that a lot, where they have a character and the character's voice is so loud in their head. They're like, okay, where do I place this character? How do I give this character room to speak? So with that in
Yes.
mind, I guess the question I would like to ask next is, when did you realize these characters and their stories had an overarching theme?
Um, I guess I was thinking in the beginning that the overarching theme was that they were all eccentric, and that we as human beings walk around and see other people, but we really never know who people really are and what secrets they have and what they do, what hobbies they have, what stories they have. And we tend to try to put people in boxes, or we try to say, okay, this person is a anthropologist, this person is a librarian, this person, but in reality, no, this person is so unique and so different. So it's an assume nothing sort of thing. So that was sort of my idea in the beginning: assume nothing about other people, take the time to get to know people and to enjoy people. But as I went along, what I realized was every one of my characters is struggling or has struggled with various life issues. And Kaleidoscope Jane, the story that ties it all together in the end, Jane says life has a way of tumbling us up and down and all around and right side and left side. But somehow, if we just land on our feet, and that's through patience and diligence and all of the other things that we have to do sometimes as human beings, we can come out okay in the end. Different, but we can come out okay, and sometimes even much better. And I think that's a good message for now. I think that's a really good message, because all of our lives are turned upside down and sideways. And not being Pollyanna about it, because not everybody's life will be okay after this. There's some people
All right.
who struggle tremendously, but also that we can do our very best to try to regain our balance as we move through life and things like this. So yes, so that would be, I guess, the overarching theme, is that life does tumble us, and sometimes we can come out stronger if we just really take the time to relax and put our heads to it. But
Yeah,
it's not.
as I was reading, the Roxanne story was my favorite initially, but once I got to Jane, I was like, okay, Jane is definitely my favorite story, and I found myself basically emotionally moved by it. It was a
Aw.
very it was a very touching story. So with that in mind, I know all of these stories are dear to you. They're your children, but if you had to choose one, which is your favorite?
Oh, that's a good question. I like, with all my characters, they all are my favorites in their own ways. And
Mhm.
so I would say that Jane would have to be one of my favorites just because I really like her character. But today, because that story is so long, it takes about 25 minutes to read it. I chose one that's shorter, who's also very dear to me, and that's Louise. Louise is a quieter story, a calmer story, but I think it also has a very important message for right now, which is that what I've noticed on social media is that people are pulling back and sort of moving inward to themselves and saying, okay, this is a different time. And what can I call for my life? What is really not important? And what is really important that I really want to focus on when things get back to normal? You know, what are the things that really, what's the footprint I want to leave? Or what are the things I want to pass on to people around me? And what do I want to do for my life? And so I think Louise is trying to pass on things to the younger generation. And I think that she spent a lot of time in her life trying to figure out what it was that she wanted to pass on, which in her case is nature. So this is about a 10-minute read, and I thought that it would be a good one to share today.
Yeah, so let's not wait any longer. Let's get right into Louise. What I'll do now is I'll cast Louise on the screen for those watching, but Carolyn would be reading along as well. Give me just 1 second.
Okay, are you ready?
Just 1 second.
Okay. Oh, sorry, Ron. I'm not rushing you.
No, ready when you are.
Okay. So the name of the story is Louise. My grandmother's name was Louise Larkinski Smith, but I don't remember anyone ever calling her that. Well, that's not true. Most of her mail had her real name on it, and for her 50th birthday, she sent herself to Spain, so her passport bore her legal name. And I think one other time she was called to jury duty, but that's about it. To all the rest of us, she was Lou, or even more often, Ladybug. That was her favorite name, Ladybug. Family and a few friends shortened this sometimes to Bug. Ladybug was a petite woman with salt and pepper hair and a smile that could light up the Dakota night sky. That's what Papa used to say, although I don't think either one of them had ever traveled to the Dakotas. She wore red lipstick that grew redder and thicker as she aged until it smeared over her lips onto her adjoining skin, sort of like a clown's mouth, but not as wide. Mama said it was on account of Bug not being able to see as well as she once could, and also because her hands shook a little. Maybe this was true, but still, my grandmother never seemed her age. She laughed and smiled more than any woman I'd ever known, and was spry as a grasshopper. Papa used to say that too, although it was a bit confusing to me since she already had a firm Bug identity. She did yoga and Tai Chi and spent hours digging and weeding in her backyard garden. For the most part, she didn't grow vegetables, although there were some cherry tomatoes and pepper plants, and in the winter, snow peas hid among the flowers. She grew asparagus also, but never with the intent of eating it. Fact was, she liked the delicate, frothy stems that shot up from the ground as much as she disliked the taste of the vegetable. It comes as no surprise that she liked ladybugs, given her nickname. Still, she wore no ladybug aprons, nor sweatshirts, nor t-shirts, nor tennis socks, nor sweaters, despite her friends' attempts to dress her accordingly. She did wear one tiny pair of ladybugs in her pierced ears. Papa gave them to her for their 25th wedding anniversary, along with a trip to the Grand Canyon. I think they were real gold, but their bodies were covered in red enamel with black spots. They perched on Bug's earlobes for almost another half-century, consuming not one single aphid. Aphids were the reason Ladybug became interested in biological gardening in the first place. Ladybugs, praying mantises, lacewing larvae, and antlions ate all manner of garden pests, aphids being foremost among them. She used to say affectionately that lacewing larvae had the most voracious appetites, but in my eye, they were ugly creatures. Whenever we sat together on our cedar bench in the garden, those larvae didn't mind falling or crawling onto my neck and taking nips out of me. Not that they hurt, because they didn't, but still they aggravated me to death. Bug had all kinds of curious homes for the creatures in her garden. She had ladybug houses tacked up on tree trunks, and in the fall, she'd put some kind of pheromone in them to encourage the insects to hibernate in her yard. Of course, Back when I was young, I didn't understand a thing about pheromones, but I liked to stand underneath the narrow wooden boxes and look up inside at globs of ladybugs clumped together in the cold. She had bat houses too, and gourd houses for the purple martins, because she claimed both ate their weight in mosquitoes each day. We'd sit outside in the late afternoon drinking iced tea with leaves of homegrown mint floating in it, and we'd listen to the sweet calls of the martins. Bug marveled that these birds flew all the way to South America each winter and sent their young scouts back to find nesting sites each February. They were fast, acrobatic, graceful flyers, magical in the air, and they loved her nesting gourds, all carefully cleaned and checked for bad spots each winter, dangling high in the air from something that looked like a TV antenna. Even when I was little, maybe 5 or 6, I somehow understood that Ladybug was not happy cooped up in her house. Family, friends, it didn't really matter who was visiting or why. She'd always try to entice them outside, to show them her worm bed or her little wooden houses with holes drilled all the way through for mason bees to fill, one egg to a hole and plug up with some sort of mud mixture. With Ladybug and me, there was no question. Whenever I visited, we rarely set foot in her house. Sometimes in the fall, when the mosquitoes weren't what she called vampiresque, we'd throw a quilt on the pine straw and a sheet over a long tree branch and camp out. The cicadas' deafening choruses, the crickets, the katydids, the barking tree frogs, all sparked wonder and awe in my young mind. That would have been enough, but it was a lot more than that. Excuse me just a second. She'd ask me about school, about my friends, about my fears and dreams. She'd listen while I talked, and we'd spend some time in quiet afterward until she offered a quote or a story or recollection from her own life that helped me know that life was a long procession of similar emotions and experiences from the time of cavemen all the way up. And always this helped calm me, excite me, encourage me. I couldn't have conceptualized it then, of course, but her thoughts and comments helped to put my life in perspective. I think for all of us, orphaned as we are in the world, even if we are surrounded by loved ones, this is the most precious gift a human can give another. It was when I was nearly 8 that she asked me what I wanted for my birthday. My heart and tongue leaped to the question. A bike, not just any bicycle, but the one at the local hardware store that had turquoise fenders and a white seat and coordinated plastic streamers spewing out of each of the handlebars. Do you now, she asked when I answered so assuredly. And just why are you wanting a bicycle? To ride, I answered. To explore, she asked. I shrugged. I guess so, I said, knowing it was more about wanting to ride with my friends, Sally and June, who both had bikes already. She nodded. There are gifts for us to enjoy every day, child, she said, and a bicycle could help with this. But it's not necessary, you know. Let me show you. Sit quietly here, listen and watch, and tell me what you find. It was true. There was an knoll climbing the wood fence, his body bright green from having recently leaped off a redbud leaf, his deep red chin sack ballooning out and in and back out again. I hadn't even seen the second one, the one hidden against the redbud's trunk, which was provoking this territorial display. And a line of ants headed somewhere through the leaves fast, and although she hadn't said anything about smell, I was aware of a musty odor of a nearby snake. Ladybug got lost in all these things. She didn't need television or long phone calls or any kind of cocktail parties to satisfy her soul. And somehow, even at my early age, she imprinted this onto my heart. On the morning I turned 8, Mama let me go visit Bug. It was a Monday, but amazingly, it was a holiday, so school was out, and Mama had time to drive me to her home. I was certain I'd find my turquoise and white bicycle. Why else would she have asked me what I wanted? I couldn't stop fidgeting in the car, twisting the seatbelt this way and that with my wiggles until Mama asked if I had fleas or poison ivy or something. I laughed, and so did she. And when she finally pulled up in front of Bug's white 3-bedroom bungalow, I leaped out and then ran back to kiss her on the cheek. I knocked, didn't wait, and threw open the front door, calling to Bug as I charged into her hall. Happy birthday, she exclaimed as she emerged from her bedroom. barefoot and hair pulled back with a scarf. I have a wonderful surprise for you. I ran toward her, hugged her, smelled vanilla soap, then let my eyes scout out my bicycle. When I ran out of hiding places in the hall and living room, I dashed from room to room, onto the back porch, into the garage. The bike was nowhere, but grandmother was still smiling. Here, she said, opening the refrigerator. I fully anticipated a cake, but when her hand emerged, it was holding a long plastic tube. Inside it, over 100 sluggish ladybugs. She handed them to me. They're cold, she said. That keeps them from flying off, right off. Gives them time to get their bearings. Supposed to really release them toward evening, but we'll take our chances. She smiled again. Ladybugs, I said, and even though I tried hard to disguise it, I knew she could hear my disappointment. You're old enough to understand now. I tried to be polite, but I didn't understand. A tube of cold ladybugs, not a bicycle at all. Let's go celebrate your birth. Let's release them, she said. I didn't trust my tongue. I nodded and followed her across her back porch, down her wood stairs, into her beautiful garden. We do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children, she said. I stared at her confused. It's a Native American saying. From now on, every birthday will return a gift to the earth. I doubt I even smiled as I removed the tube's lid and watched the ladybugs make their ways out into her garden, into the sky, and some into the larger world. Even the saying, which she repeated over and over as the years went by, made little sense to me, as I had no children. I was only a child myself. When the last ladybug exited the tube, she moved to the old stained bench and patted the seat beside her. And we sat for several hours listening to the birds and finding shapes in the clouds and watching a spider scurry down its web every time she touched the silk with a tiny stick. Finally, she filled a spray bottle with water, and I misted the web, and we marveled at it and at the Z-like initial in its center, as though the spider had signed its name. It was a good morning with her, despite my heavy heart. We picked blueberries for a mid-morning snack, and I helped her weed among her daylilies. Finally, around noon, she said, let's go exploring and see what we can find at the old hardware store down the street. And she smiled, and I smiled, and I knew the book was mine. It was her way to find immeasurable joy in giving, and so it was that she gave me the bike, and in years to come, a laptop, a wakeboard, a jade ring, a saxophone, and a prom dress, among other things. It became our ritual. Every birthday, we began by returning a gift to the earth, and always she quoted that saying about not inheriting the earth from our ancestors, but borrowing it from our children. I enjoyed our morning celebrations, but usually felt a little on edge, anxious to lay my hands on my current heart's desire, all the time not recognizing that these gifts lost their excitement, their luster, and importance, while her gifts, her tubes of ladybugs and baby praying mantises and additional bat boxes and brand new martin gourds, tattooed themselves deeply onto my soul. It's my refrigerator that now holds tubes of ladybugs, one for each of the 5 children standing before me. They jostle one another, step on each other's toes, and fuss until I tell them to stop. Their faces are eager as Jason, the eldest, tells them about aphids, and Terry, the middle child, explains why the bugs are chilled. Anna, the tallest, rocks forward on tiptoes and pulls Bug's framed photo from the shelf. The children pass it around solemnly. They study it and tell stories about her life. Stories I have given to them during holidays, over meals, at bedtimes. It is Lee who bores at this first. He grabs hold of Lou's arm and pulls his cousin across the kitchen tiles to the door. The others follow. And I, once again 8 years old, though now with graying hair and unforgiving knees, stand in the grass and watch tentative ladybugs reach the tops of their tubes. They emerge onto the fingers of Bug's great-great-grandchildren, and I smile, laugh a little, and hand them the earth. Thank you. There.
All right,
You're back.
that was great. Yes, that
Thank
was
you.
great.
A little bit of home stuff going on with the phone ringing in the background. I'm
Oh,
sorry about that.
that's
At least we
fine.
don't have the dog and the parrot going now.
Yeah,
So that's good.
these things happen. So for everyone out there who enjoyed the story and would be interested in hearing more stories from Kaleidoscope Jane, where can they pick up this book?
Yes, okay. Kaleidoscope Jane can be found both locally, both at Barnes and Noble and Ernest and Hadley, and also online. It's in softback like this, and it's also on Kindle and any ebook format. So all my books are like that. You can pick up any one of my books in that way. So and some of the stories, Ron, I know you've read these. Some are funny, some are thought-provoking,
Mhm.
some are calmer, some are a little bit more raucous. So so there's a quite a variety within them.
What I like most about the Lou story is basically it says and it takes me back to my own childhood. These
Oh,
gifts that we receive, the value they quickly devalue, but it's about the wisdom that we get from our elders, and that's invaluable. So, with that said, someone watching this, they're a younger perspective writer, and they're holding on to their work out of fear, or maybe they don't think it's good enough. So, what advice can you give to that person?
the first advice, I guess, would be find a group, a supportive group, ours or any other group, and jump in that way by going, reading parts of your stories, getting constructive feedback, and then go for it. Don't be shy after that. There's so many different ways now to publish. You know, when I was coming along in my 20s, 30s, 40s, you had to type it out with a typewriter for one thing, often
Mhm.
with carbon paper, and then eventually with the Xerox machine. You put it all in a big box, your whole manuscript, all 300 and something pages. You'd have to go to the post office, and you were sending your child off into the world with a postman, and you had to wait sometimes 3 to 6 months to find out whether or not you'd been accepted, and you could only, or rejected, and you could only send to one publisher at a time. You weren't allowed to submit simultaneously.
Mm.
And so as a result of that, you'd have sometimes 6 months between shippings, in and out and in and out and in and out. And most writers will tell you you'll get rejected a lot more traditionally than you will accepted. It's just part of the game that you have to go through in order to eventually find your way. So traditional writing is one way, and now you can submit simultaneously, so you can have 30 or 40 different manuscripts floating around, same story, and you have a lot more freedom now as an author. But for those who don't want to go that route, who want to either go through a sort of hybrid publishing where it's partially worked with partially you're doing the work and partially your publisher's doing the work, or whether you decide to go totally independent and just do all the work yourself. There are just so many different options, and it's very confusing, and you have to be careful. But it's worth the effort, because everybody who puts things on a paper or uses any other creative way, dancing, music, everybody has a story to tell, and it should be out there, and there are people who will be interested in it. So the most important thing, I think, for writers is don't give up ever. You just keep putting it out there and putting it out there, and then once it's out there comes the hardest part, because that's the marketing, the selling of yourself, and that part is for most writers or creatives very hard, but that's the part that requires the most time, is continuing to let people know about your work once it gets out. But if you want to write just for your family, hey, that's great too. A lot of people write just their histories, which is super. So yeah, so just don't give up. Just keep on going, and don't pay attention. Listen to good critique, positive critique, which tells you, okay, maybe this could improve a little bit here, but don't let anybody put you down and discourage you.
I think that's excellent advice. So,
Thank you.
to close out, is there anything you'd like to say before we depart?
I would. Thank you to the Tuscaloosa Public Library. Thank you to you, Ron, and also to Vince and to Rick, so much for letting this project go forward. I know all the local authors are so excited about being able to do this, and hopefully we'll be able to sort of get not only our works known, but also entertain and educate, because there are many people who will be doing different kinds of things that are memoirs and so forth. Other people, and make their lives a little bit lighter and happier. I finished a book last night, and written by a lady who lives in Atlanta, and my whole week had been so much better because I couldn't wait every night to get to the place where I could go read. And if any of us can ever do that for anyone else, it's quite a wonderful gift. I love that.
Well, yes, I guess on behalf of Tuscaloosa Public Library, I'd just like to say that we're looking forward to continuing this, and we're happy to provide the platform for our local talent. And if you're watching this, like the video, please share it around. You can also comment, and we'll get back to you if you have any questions. And that's all for today. So I think
Thank
we're
you.
done here. All right.
Thank you, Ron. And thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.